Embrace who you really are, son. And you will become a legend.
When the man comes around.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. The Kraven movie has basically been the final nail in the coffin to the current Sony Marvel universe as it exists right now. They're going to be doing a soft reboot on all the creative there and trying it again several years down the road. This video will be for the ending of Kraven, all the planned and now canceled sequel stories that they were trying to set up. Some of the Easter eggs and references are a little more obvious, like all the Miles Warren Spider-Man clone saga of it all. That's right, Sony was going to do their own version of a Spider-Man clone saga down the road, which I don't think I've ever seen anyone speak fondly of from the original comics. There were some interesting things that they eventually did with Kane and Ben Reilly, like they're doing some stuff with him in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse right now. But the actual comic book saga that it's based on was a mess when it originally happened. And there's all the Kraven's Last Hunt Sinister Six stuff that Aaron Taylor Johnson was saying that they were trying to eventually do, which also has now been canceled. So we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. There is a lot of Spider-Man stuff, actual Spider-Man stuff happening in the next couple of years. Of course, I will be doing videos for everything, like Spider-Man 4. We have that Spider-Man TV series in the MCU happening in January. I will be doing episode videos for that. Currently, Sony has canceled all these sequels that they were setting up with the Easter eggs at the end of the Kraven movie, so I'll explain what their planned story was as we go through each of them. Some of them are a little bit bigger than others. During the movie, the Rhino is a disgruntled mafia boss looking to expand his operation, spurned by Kraven's father, played by Russell Crowe. He suffers from a genetic condition that leaves him very weak, and because he thinks he'll never get any respect until he becomes strong, he eventually finds scientist Miles Warren in New York City who performs an experiment on him. He doesn't get into details about what he actually did during the experiments. He just says that he performed experiments on him, turning him into the Rhino with biological powers, like he physically transforms into Rhino form, as opposed to Paul Giamatti's Rhino in the original comic book Rhino who wore suits. Unless he uses a constant drip serum to suppress his powers, this will remind you from the X-Men storyline in the movies. They actually had a subplot with like the mutant cure that they would take. His anti-Rhino serum works kind of like that. It basically keeps him in pure human form. Unless he takes it, he'll instantly transform into Rhino form. It's kind of like the X-Men movies where if they stopped taking the mutant cure like the drip, their powers would instantly come back. We basically see this happen at the end of the movie where he just lets himself fully transform into Rhino form. His main weakness in that form is it is extremely painful, with the idea that it will eventually drive him mad because the pain become too much for him to handle. Kraven's father wanted to kill him but couldn't do it himself, so he betrayed Kraven by tricking the Rhino into attacking Kraven without telling his son so that Kraven would take care of the problem for him. Once he learned the truth, this betrayal was the final nail in the coffin, convincing Kraven that he needed to kill his father, letting him be eaten by a giant bear. Cold way to go, probably one of the most brutal takedowns in the movie. I kind of wonder if that was one of his conditions for being in the movie, like, I'll be in the movie, but you have to kill me off in some grisly way at the very end. And give me a giant bag of Sony cash. Still not totally sure why Russell Crowe agreed to be in this movie. The Miles Warren character later transforms Kraven's brother, the Chameleon, into comic book form, giving him his comic book appearance, his abilities to actually transform his body into anyone that he wants. He was already skilled at mimicking other people's voices. They kept mentioning that throughout the movie, trying to build towards this big reveal at the end where you actually see him in full chameleon form. He said he was going to take over their father's criminal empire, and this was meant to set up a direct conflict with Kraven, eventually forced to kill him in what would have been the direct sequel. So like the Chameleon ending was direct setup for Kraven 2, as that would have been. Obviously that's been canceled now. Whereas Brother would have mimicked more powerful fighters across the movie, so they would have eventually taken it to more of a brother versus brother family drama to full comic book level, where Chameleon transforms into Kraven again, like he did at the end of the movie. He transforms into Aaron Taylor Johnson, and he's all freaked out by it. Imagine him doing that again with the final boss fight of that Kraven 2 movie being Aaron Taylor Johnson Kraven versus Kraven, like he would have been fighting himself, essentially, during the sequel. Calypso would have come back to be his teammate, love interest, just continuing that subplot. Miles Warren's subplot was also meant to be more of a direct setup for the planned trilogy that they were doing, because just like the Venom movies were planned as a trilogy, like Tom Hardy was like, 3 and done, I'm gone, see you later. Aaron Taylor Johnson signed a similar type of deal. Miles Warren would have been the villain of Kraven 3 if they had made that, with the idea that Kraven goes to New York City, we're talking about Spider-Man territory here in New York City, to hunt and kill Miles Warren to stop him from creating even more supervillains based on the Spider-Man comics. Miles Warren was the original villain responsible for the Spider-Man clone saga in those comics. That was originally his whole thing, cloning. He was a professor at Empire State University, the school where Spider-Man went, who was in love with his student, Gwen Stacy. After her death in the comics, he blamed Spider-Man for that, sought to kill him, creating a clone of Gwen Stacy first, which went horribly wrong, as you would probably expect, but then created Kane Parker, then eventually created Ben Reilly. Andy Samberg actually played a version of Ben Reilly during Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. He'll probably be back during Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse.
Now I'm here in the alley. There's something unusual happening.
Just because the Spider-Verse was so big with so many different versions, Kane was also featured in the background of those shots too. Miles Warren eventually took the persona of the Jackal in the comics, eventually fought Spider-Man the old-fashioned way. This is why he would have been more of a trilogy payoff too, just because they would have gotten to actual Spider-Man versions later on. They didn't say whether or not he was going to be fighting Kane or Ben Reilly showing up in the trilogy, but Ben Reilly I think is the more famous of the two, so it probably would have been a version of him. The other major Easter eggs were at the very end, right before the end credits, where he puts on his comic book jacket that his father had made from the lion that almost killed him. In truth, if you remember watching it, or if you didn't watch it, which it seems like most people did not based on the box office for the movie right now, that lion seemed more like he was just bringing him to Calypso so she could give him the serum and give him all of his powers. There was all this implied mysticism, like the lion somehow knew what was going to happen to him eventually. What did the lion know? What was he cooking? With him wearing that jacket, sitting in the chair meant to be based on the iconic comic book panel, they also used this pose in the jacket for one of the movie's posters too. There were actually a number of deleted scenes of him running around hunting people wearing that jacket too. So earlier in the movie, or during a version of the movie, he would have been wearing the jacket much earlier too. So a bunch of deleted scenes, as you would probably expect. That is a hallmark of a lot of the Sony Spider-Man universe movies, where there's just a whole bunch of footage they wind up shooting, a whole bunch of Easter eggs they just delete at the end of the movie before they release it. The last big sequels teaser was for Kraven's Last Hunt storyline and a Sinister Six spinoff, when his brother said all he really cared about was hunting for the next trophy. So this was meant to set up the idea that he killed his brother eventually in the sequels, killed Miles Warren in New York City, in whichever Spider-Man clone he created, probably Ben Reilly. And according to Aaron Taylor Johnson, he would have fought Tom Holland's Spider-Man as part of Kraven's Last Hunt storyline. That would have been like the final movie that they ever did with the Kraven character. During that, Kraven successfully defeats Spider-Man, thinking he's killed him, wears his costume briefly. Now remember, this is during the black suit era, not the symbiote era where he actually wore the Venom symbiote. He wore a regular non-Venom symbiote black suit for a while too. Like just a regular black suit. Kraven pretends to be Spider-Man while in that suit for a while, part of some weird catharsis proving that he's the world's greatest hunter, but because he's achieved everything he could ever achieve, he ultimately feels empty and that his life no longer has any meaning, so he kills himself at the end of that story. With them also revealing that Spider-Man survived his attack, crawls his way out of his own grave, and that's why it's called Kraven's Last Hunt, because he literally dies at the end of that story. It's meant to be Kraven's final story. I'm assuming that Sony would not have ended the movie version with Aaron Taylor Johnson killing himself. Like, this just feels like too much of a downer ending for like the final film. Had all these Kraven movies wound up being made, like if they'd been financially successful, they probably would have wanted to do more crossovers with him. Because also, on top of all this, with him fighting Tom Holland's Spider-Man, Aaron Taylor Johnson also said that he was going to be part of the Sinister Six team-up movie that Sony was developing separately from all the direct Kraven sequels. You probably remember hearing about this a number of years ago when they first started doing the Venom movie. Sony wanted to try again for doing a Sinister Six spin-off movie, which they originally tried to do during the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man era. During that, they also would have teamed up to fight a version of Spider-Man. I believe it would have been Tom Holland's Spider-Man. They started to set that up during Venom Let There Be Carnage, Spider-Man No Way Home, then Morbius, but by the time Venom The Last Dance just came out a couple months ago, they'd already pivoted away from that plan and basically canceled any further Sinister Six team-up plans. So as of right now, there will be no Kraven sequel. Aaron Taylor Johnson probably not going to return as the character. He's not feeling bad about that. Like, Aaron Taylor Johnson is totally fine not coming back as Kraven. and Sony is eventually going to soft reboot their universe, because if you think this is the last time they're going to try and make a Spider-Man spin-off movie without Spider-Man in it, you are gravely mistaken. Even though the Sony Marvel universe right now is kind of dead, it's only going to be dead for a couple years until they try again. I will do a separate video about that because there's like a much bigger story about what was going on behind the scenes in all the Spider-Man of it all. Sony released this big damage control article because the Kraven box office was so bad. So I'll get into that in another video that should post in the next couple of days. The only other thing that I didn't talk about was the Foreigner character. He's just called Foreigner in the comics. His subplot was meant to set up the Silver Sable and Black Cat spin-off movies too, because he's connected to Silver Sable in the comics. At one time, Sony was also developing a Silver Sable movie and a Black Cat movie. Those are not happening anymore either right now, like those have been canceled. So as of right now, all the Foreigner stuff really goes nowhere in the movie. Like, it ends with Calypso killing him and boom, that's the end of his storyline. But if you have any other questions about what was going on with the Kraven movie or just anything in general, just write them below in the comments. Speaking of Spider-Man, I just did a video for Ryan Reynolds and Andrew Garfield talking about the future of Deadpool, like what's happening with Deadpool 4 in the future of Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man. Click here to learn about that, and click here to learn about Chris Evans coming back in Avengers 5. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.